At Granger, we're for the ones who specialize in saving the day and for the ones who've mastered the art of keeping business moving. We offer industrial-grade supplies for every industry with same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders, all backed by real people ready to help. So you can get the right answers and products right when you need them. Call, clickgranger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Good morning, ALF listeners. Thank you for joining us today. We are headed today to Ewen Maddock Dam. We are headed also to Baroon Pocket Dam, two storages on Queensland's Sunshine Coast that hold some pretty amazing stocks of quality bass and even saratoga. And we really couldn't have hoped for a better guide to fishing those systems than our guest today, David Race, because David has been heavily involved in getting those systems stocked and making them the fisheries that they are today. And he's fished them for many, many years, over a decade, fishing these two systems, being involved with stocking, being involved with fisheries in turning Ewen Maddock Dam and Baroon Pocket Dam into a resource for Sunshine Coast anglers. If you're new to the Sunshine Coast or if you're just visiting the Sunshine Coast, then Ewen Maddock and Baroon Pocket Dams may not even be on your radar. They're probably not the first destinations we think of when we're talking about fishing the Sunshine Coast area. But please trust me when I say that once you've listened to this interview, you're definitely going to want to go and check these systems out. Now, we are going to focus on bass today, but there's also some quality saratoga in particularly Ewen Maddock Dam. So for Team Doc Lures members, we've uploaded an extended ALF Plus version of this interview that includes about 10 or 12 extra minutes talking about how to target saratoga, specifically in Ewen Maddock Dam. If you're not a Team Doc Lures member, then you're missing the Plus edition of this episode, but you're also missing the Plus editions of multiple other episodes previously. You're missing live streams, you're missing audio masterclasses, you're missing our fishing location research tool, and you're also not benefiting from the great deals we do on tackle for our members through the TDL Tackle Collective. So if you'd like to be part of that, it costs less than what you'd pay for a cup of coffee once a week, but it's those Team Doc Lures memberships that keep the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast on the air, so we really appreciate the support of our members, and you can become a member over at team.doclures.com. So that's team, team.doclures.com. If you're keen for that, then go over and sign up now. And instead of listening to this episode, you can listen to the ALF Plus edition of this episode and instantly get all of that amazing information about how to target saratoga in Ewen Maddock Dam as well. So go and check it out, team.doclures.com. But now, folks, let's get into today's episode of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast.
This is the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, where our mission is to help everyday sports fishers experience extraordinary lure fishing. If next level fishing is your dream, then let us provide the tools and information that will bring that dream to life. Tune in as our expert hosts chat with Australia's best anglers and share their tips for success. Then check out our website. It's one of Australia's largest and most popular online fishing resources. But right now, settle in to listen as ALF founder Greg Doc Lures Vinyl delivers today's episode through the nerdy lens of a scientist, lure maker, and sport fishing tragic.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 629 of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, where we're headed today to Ewen Maddock Dam on the Sunshine Coast, and we're probably going to touch on Baroon Pocket Dam just a little bit as well. But our guest today is none other than David Brace, who's been on the show before, way back in episode 422, where we talked about Kinchin Dam Barramundi. Today, different species, different lake, but right in David's backyard, and he knows a little bit about this system. So, David, welcome back to the show, mate.
Thanks so much for having me on, Greg. I'm super excited to be talking about these two fisheries. I'm so passionate about it. Yeah, this is where a lot of it started for me, back in getting in the conservationist side of things. And it's also, as you said, it's in my backyard, mate, literally.
Yeah. Yep, right in your backyard. But, mate, both of these systems, you've had involvement in turning them into the fisheries that they are today, because you're heavily involved in the local stocking groups. And I think we've already introduced you to our audience back in episode 422. So they kind of know it. Those opening questions I normally ask, they kind of know those things already. So maybe let's have a little bit of a talk about the history of Ewen Maddock Dam as a fishery and the history of stocking the dam. So give us a kind of 33,000-foot aeroplane view of what Ewen Maddock Dam is all about. It's on the Sunshine Coast in the Landsborough area, yeah?
Yeah, mate, absolutely. It's based in Landsborough, which is in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. I started fishing this fishery back in the late 80s. The dam was actually built I was in two sections, started in 1976 and second stage finished, I think, in 1983. I was a young whippersnapper around 16, 17 when I started fishing in around in the very late 80s. So, mate, through that, there was a local stocking group started at that time and did a lot of stocking. And I realised when it was around the late 90s, the decline in the fish stocks. And obviously back then we didn't have the social media that we do have today. And I didn't realise back then there was an actual stocking group actually stocking it.
Yeah.
So the Australian bass stocks that I absolutely noticed that the decline in the stocks, but the fish were quality of fish was just outstanding. So in 2007, I noticed the lake got quite low and a lot of fish went over the wall and a lot of fish were caught in the spillway below. The lake actually rolled over, and so I did see a lot of fish, I suppose, dying to their detriment. Back then, there was some barramundi actually stocked in there. There was also golden perch, mate, that was stocked in there by the original stocking group. And there was barra there 120 odd centimetres in length. And the golden perch, mate, were just football size. They were some of them would have been 70 centimetres in length. They were just enormous. And it was heartbreaking to see all these fish go over the spillway and to their demise. We did what we could to save as many fish as we could. And then, I suppose in the next few years, the decline in fish even grew even more, especially with every wet season, more fish going over. And by then, the original fish stocking group have actually dissolved. But even the Australian bass, mate, that we were catching in there were well over the 50 centimetre mark and a trophy fish in their own right. So in my good wisdom, I tried to form a stocking group. Back then, I suppose Facebook wasn't really well used by a lot of the older generation, and there were fishing forums such as Sweetwater Fishing, and that was run by Gary Fitzgerald.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Everyone knows Fitzy. I got in contact with Fitzy and he pretty much threw me straight in the deep end and I had to start swimming. And that's the type of bloke that he is. And I rallied up a few guys, local. I got in contact with the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and some delegates from SEQ Water, mate. We held a meeting in my dining room in May 2010. And at the end of that meeting, mate, we formed a stocking group and it all started from there.
And this is going back. Ewen Maddock Dam, we were just having a chat a minute ago before I started recording, and you said that this is it's a man-made dam. It was created for the purposes of providing drinking water at that time anyway for Caloundra. And it's a tributary of the Mooloolah River, so it would have had natural populations of wild river bass in it before it was dammed. Presumably those fish then would have, for some period of time, they would have grown, and they obviously can't spawn in the dam. This is the issue, of course, and so many of our Australian fish species need to get access to the estuaries to spawn, bass among them. And so when it does rain, when you get that spill over the dam wall, they do go over the dam wall. Barramundi, the same thing. And so you lose all those fish, and obviously they can't get back in. So stocking becomes critical to keep those fish in the lake. But tell us a little bit about the dam, mate. It's only a fairly small system. How deep is it? How big is it? How high is the dam wall? Those sorts of things. Do you have all those stats at your fingertips?
Yeah, mate, yeah. I don't have the specifications on the dam wall at hand, but at full capacity, mate, the surface area of Ewen Maddock Dam is 370 hectares. Okay. So it is, quite a small, lake.
Yep.
And the average depth is only 4.5 metres in depth. So, when we do have those really cold winters and that lake rolls over, you can understand why fish do suffer a little bit.
Yeah. So anytime you've got a shallow system, it's at the whims of the ambient temperatures. So if you've got a system that is only 4.5 metres deep, you get a really chilly winter, that water cools down a lot more. If you've got a deeper dam, obviously it stays a little bit more temperate in the depths, and so the fish can get a bit of refuge from the cold by getting into deeper water, or it gets more stable sort of temperatures at least. But at the surface, that's where the temperatures are going to be fluctuating. And in a shallow lake, everything's pretty close to the surface, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what bait species are in there to feed the bass, mate? Is it a bony brim system? Is it a gudgeon system? What's in there?
Yeah, bony brim. Yeah, but you're definitely bony brim. We've got a lot of, small gudgeons and whatnot, but they're the two predominant bait fish in that particular fishery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you've been involved in stocking the dam since 2010. Tell us how it's progressed since then.
Mate, it's been unbelievable, mate. We've the stocking members of this Ewen Maddock Fish Management Incorporated, especially in the early days, mate, like it was a real struggle. Like, when Fritzy, he said to me, mate, I know you're going to find it really hard to start with, but it's all going to be worth it. And now we're really reaping the rewards for all the hard work that all our members of the stocking group have done over the past years. And we've still got some founding members in the group. We've got army officers, lawyers, and so many. We've also, our president, we've just had our AGM, works for the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. Justin Gibson, mate, and he works as a dog handler mitigating fire ants.
Right, okay.
It's a very diverse range of blokes and ladies. And mate, when we first started, like it was a real battle. Even just setting up a stocking group, we couldn't get a bank account because we weren't incorporated. We couldn't get incorporated because we didn't have a bank account. Yep. And then we had to just cross so many different hurdles, but we got there in the end. Even doing a constitution, we never even done a constitution before, so we did so well. And then we didn't have any funding. We weren't on the SIP scheme or anything like that. So there's always raffles and sausage sizzles every moment we got. We were just
raising money any way you can.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And then we got into the fishing comps, and we made some good money from there. And then I suppose we were actually getting money from the government through a recreational fishing enhancement program, and which wasn't much, but it was enough to put fish in the lake to get us started. And mate, I was a member of the Mondrian Anglers Stocking Association up at Lake Mondrian, and I had the privilege of meeting Bill Proctor, and obviously he's passed on now, but such a generous man. His hatchery was up in the Childers region, and our first stocking, I rang Bill and said, mate, this is the situation. This is how much money we got. He goes, no worries, mate, I'll sort you out. And he came down, and we paid him for what fish that we thought we were getting. And he said, mate, I've emptied all my lakes, all my ponds. And he said, I've given you all the bass fingerlings that I had left. And he said, I said to him, mate, how much do I owe you? And he said, don't worry about it, mate, it's a gift. And, mate, there's a lot of good fish still in there from Bill Proctor hatchery, yeah. So
awesome stuff. There's some great people out there in the land of fishing, no doubt about it, and he's definitely one of them, yeah. So how many fish are stocked in there in a typical year, mate?
Mate, I haven't got our management plan in front of me, but, mate, we stock, like 30-odd thousand bass in there a year. So at the moment, we're up to our third stage of applying for different species that we want on that management plan. So at the moment, with Mary River cod, which I'll touch on a little bit later.
Yeah.
Australian bass, obviously, and Saratoga. So the Saratoga obviously breed in that landlocked environment. Yes. I don't know how well they do, but all the right ingredients there are there for them to do that as such.
And they certainly do quite well, just a little bit north of Ewen Maddock in Barron Dam. They spawn quite happily.
Yeah, correct, mate. The fingerlings, for a bass that's 3 centimetres in length or 30 millimetres, we're paying 30 to 35 cents a fingerling for them.
Yep.
Just to give you a comparison, Mary River cod, we're paying $2 each.
Yes.
And that's up to 5 centimetres. And then the Saratoga, mate, they're pretty special. And that's why we don't like people taking them out of the lake, and we could be spending up to $50 to $100 on a fish per fish.
Yep.
Yeah. 15 centimetres in length. So great sport fish. Yeah, they're pretty damn special.
They're extremely special. They're no good to eat anyway, so you'd hope that everybody's putting them back. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, mate, I really want to get on to how to fish Ewen Maddock in just a moment. Before we do that, let's have a quick chat also about the Baroon Pocket Dam, because it's only a hop, skip and a jump away as well.
Yep.
And I believe that you're involved in stocking that one as well.
Yeah, mate, that's right. So after about 2 years of stocking Ewen Maddock Dam, the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries approached us and said, hey, look, Baroon Pocket Dam isn't being stocked. Would you like to take on the management of fish stocking that lake as well? And we asked them, look, we're doing it pretty tough here and just stocking Ewen Maddock Dam. And they said, look, we'll still give you the same amount of money that we're giving you for Ewen Maddock Dam in regards to the recreational fishing enhancement program. And I said, just use that money to stock it. And I said, all you'd be doing is, is benefiting the water quality, putting that fish in. And I said, yep, let's do it. That's something that's going to really benefit the area and the fishery itself. So we took on that fishery as well, mate. And in there, pretty much stocked just Mary River cod and Australian bass.
Okay.
But in 3 years of actually starting the group, we really had, as I said earlier, we had to come over some real big challenges. So even Ewen Maddock Dam, mate, the fishing the regulations, we couldn't fish the lake technically during the closed season because it wasn't on the list that we could actually fish it. So Ewen Maddock Dam, the fish stocking group rallied and lobbied with the Department of Agricultural Fisheries, and I believe our fish stocking group has a lot to do with the regulation changes that happen in the freshwater fishing, especially in southeast Queensland. So hence the reason why now in certain areas you can actually fish above landlocked environments such as the dam and weirs, which prior we couldn't.
Yeah. So look,
yeah,
a tremendous credit to you, mate. So, and on behalf of anglers everywhere, thank you for those efforts, because it's people like yourself, and there are so many people like you, Dave, across all of Australia who are involved in stocking groups that have created fisheries or maintained fisheries or conserved fisheries that otherwise we wouldn't have. So it's a tremendous resource for people on the Sunshine Coast. They're fish that naturally lived in those systems anyway, but were, well, with the exception of saratoga perhaps, but the other species, they lived in those systems, but the damming of the rivers has stopped them from maintaining their populations. So having a stocking group there, ensuring that there are still fish, that's good for the environment and good for anglers as well. So thank you for your efforts and all that hard work over all those years to create that fishery. So, mate, let's start talking about actually fishing Ewen Maddock and a little bit also Baroon Pocket Dam as well. But firstly, I want to make clear to everybody, I guess, that these are not lakes that you can go and put your bass boat in, are they, and go charging around at 100 k's an hour with your 250 horsepower outboard.
No, absolutely not. Well, Ewen Maddock Dam is pretty much kayak only, and there's no electric motors, and that's because of the noxious weed of the kabumba weed in there. Just recently, I believe that the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries have been doing some research. Actually, they've been doing it for 19 years, I believe. But they're trying to get some biological control, and they've introduced the kabumba weevil into some other local fisheries like Lake Kawongbar to combat that kabumba weed. So that's the reason why no electric motors are allowed on Ewen Maddock Dam.
So for those that are not familiar with kabumba, it's an exotic weed. It forms very, very dense growths across lakes. It completely chokes lakes. It chokes out the fish, chokes out all the native vegetation. But it also is, if you break a piece off, it regenerates and forms a new plant. So charging around there in a boat with a propeller is just going to create more and more of this weed, make it proliferate even more. So that hence the need to restrict access to kayaks only. Keep in mind, though, if you are fishing this system and you're using a kayak, do clean all your gear down thoroughly before you go into another system that perhaps doesn't have kabumba, because you can transfer it around, okay? So you need to make sure that you're pretty careful about not moving little pieces of plant from one system to another.
That's a good point, Greg. Even Ewen Maddock Dam, mate, SEQ Water and their good wisdom have actually put a washing down station there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So it's a fairly shallow lake. 4.5 metres is not deep in the scheme of things. And another reason probably why that kabumba is proliferating, because, if the water levels are not at 100%, then potentially the entire lake bed is within the sort of photosynthetic zone that the plants need to be able to grow. So could get pretty choked with weed, I'd imagine.
Yeah, mate, it does, especially in those warmer months when, like, obviously the warmer water and the weather just helps that plant growth. Mate, opposed to Baroon Pocket Dam, it's 380 hectares surface area at full capacity and an average depth of 15 metres, so it's a little bit deeper.
Yeah, very different system.
But, and it's also elevated a lot more, mate. It's approximately 215 metres above sea level, but you're allowed boats in that fishery, but electric motor only, no combustion.
Yes, okay.
And obviously kayaks as well, yeah.
And just a little bit of a science lesson here, mate. So what causes, or what doesn't cause, but what enables that massive plant growth to happen is nutrients that come off the land. So they come from various different sources. But if the water's shallow, then what tends to happen is you get a lot of aquatic weed growth. If you've got deeper water, what tends to happen is you get more, you could get aquatic weed growth around the edges, but you often get algal blooms. And that's something I believe Baroon Pocket Dam is prone to.
Yes, mate, it is, absolutely. Yeah, you'll find during the year SEQ water will close it off to swimmers, etc. Yeah, because it's harmful. Yeah, it's exposed to our health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the toxins these algae produce there's various different toxins depending on the algae that are blooming at the time, but yeah, they can cause damage to your liver. They can cause all sorts of neurological issues. They can cause skin irritations. They can cause asthma, all sorts of things. So they are quite nasty toxins. So anyway, enough of the science lesson. Let's get back to the fishing situation, mate. So tell us something, as somebody who has fished these systems for the last, 30-odd years, more, 40 years, knows them like the back of his hand, was involved in turning them into the fishery that they are today. Tell us something you've learned about fishing either one or both of these lakes that the average person might not know about catching bass out of Ewen Maddock Dam.
Yeah, mate. Well, both fisheries I like fishing at various different times of the year, obviously. Like every other bass fishery, you'll definitely get a lot of schooled fish during that spawning season, which is now during winter. I really, really love fishing the wet season where the lakes rise, the water levels rise and cover over the grassy areas, fresh grass areas, and you've got so many different morsels coming out of the ground, bugs and worms, and the fish are just red hot, like the bass. And then, there's times there around November and December where the Saratoga and Ewen Maddock Dam are just on fire. And it's just great surface action. And then the Mary River cod as well, mate. But Mary River cod are more so like a bycatch. And actually tomorrow we're actually getting a contractor out, which is organised by the Department of Fisheries, to do some electrofishing to see how many Mary River cod are surviving in Ewen Maddock Dam.
Yeah, okay.
So we're super excited about the results on that, because we've been stocking them for about 5 years, mate, and been heavily involved in that program, mate. I used to go up to the Jerry Cook hatchery late afternoons and go and actually dive into the ponds there at late afternoon and check for the eggs and let the people know whether they'd laid eggs or not. So
yeah. This is a species. It's important when we're looking at ecosystem health. And if you've got a healthy ecosystem, you've got healthy fish, you've got quality fish that are in good condition, which is what we all want, of course. And part of a healthy ecosystem is having all of those apex predators right through to the smaller species that we, as anglers, refer to as bait species, but conservationists see them very differently. But you need to have those Mary River cod, you need to have the bass, you need to have the bony brim, you need to have the invertebrates and the smaller species of gudgeons and that sort of stuff as well to have a healthy food chain and a healthy system. So putting cod in there, very, very important. As a sporting species, as you said, they're more of a bycatch. They're a protected species as well, so they have to be put back, right?
The regulations in there are a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay.
But obviously in the wild, mate, they're endangered and 100%, mate. Like you don't even take them out of the water.
No.
Just return them straight back in. Take the lure out and put them straight back.
And I would urge anyone who's listening today who does happen to hook a Mary River cod, whether it's in this system or any other system across southeast Queensland, please do the right thing. If you want to get a photograph, okay, but do it, be organised, do it as quickly as you can. I have had a chat with Ben Diggles in the past about how to handle fish so they have the best chance of surviving. Go and listen to that episode. But make sure they go back into the water and that they go back in good health. Even if you are allowed to take them, doesn't mean you should.
No, 100%, mate. I totally agree. Yeah, great advice.
All right, mate, let's break down. And I want to focus. So you've said that you can catch fish in these systems all year round, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's focus on, we're mid-June at the moment, late June-ish. So let's focus on the next few months. We're going through the back half of winter and we've got sort of spring on the horizon, hopefully not too far down the track. What can we expect in terms of the fishing in these systems over the next few months? So let's focus on late June, July, August, maybe into September.
Yep. Mate, well, let's focus on Australian bass just to start with.
Yeah, let's do that, yeah.
So this time of the year, mate, like I fished Baroon Pocket Dam a couple of weeks ago, and it was absolutely atrocious weather. It's absolutely pouring down with rain. And, mate, it was just an edge bite. I had a lot of water running down the bank, and, all the edges of the whole lake was just mud. And I was actually casting lures onto the bank and bringing in the water. And I was just using a TT switchblade. I end up, within 5 hours, mate, I end up with 57 bass.
Whoa.
I caught. Yeah.
Good session, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Like that's the type of fishery it can be. It's just trying to work out what they're trying to do on the day. But this time of the year, mate, well, let's just focus on the schooling bass. And, mate, there's a technique that I like using. And I use a Z-Man 3.5-inch grubs. I preferably prefer the colour, something a little bit darker that forms a bit of a silhouette in the water.
Okay.
So like a colour of bloodworm or green pumpkin. And, mate, what I do is I rig that with a TT Fishing's a 1/2-ounce jig head and a 3/0 headlocks. And what I'm doing, mate, is I'm actually dropping it into the school. I'm looking at my fish finder, knowing where the fish are, and I'm staying connected to the lure the whole time. So I'm not technically jinging it like I would like a switchblade or something like that. I'm actually dropping it down really, really slow and then bringing it up really, really slow through that school of fish.
Okay.
In that water column.
So not hops. You're doing a long drop and then a long retrieve.
No, correct, mate. So I'm letting the weight of the jig head do all the action for the lure. Obviously, being a curly-tailed lure,
yep,
it's doing all the action pretty much for me.
Yes.
So as I'm bringing that lure through that school, sometimes when you're hitting the actual bottom of the lake and you're bringing it up, stirs a bit of mud and they'll hit it then. But what I'm waiting for, mate, is pretty much loading that rod up. So the type of rod that I'm using, mate, I'm using a TT Fishing red belly spin rod, and they're 7 foot long, super fast action and very responsive. It's a 3 to 6 kilo rod, mate. And I'm using the rod tip actually hooks the fish for me. So normally when you get a strike from a fish, the normal reaction is just to load the rod up and hook it and, start winding as such. With this particular technique, you're actually lifting the rod up, and as it hits your lure, the bending of the rod, obviously the action of the rod just bends over. You don't strike as such. You just keep on lifting, and as you're lifting, you're winding. And then you bring the rod tip down and then you hook. So it's very, very, very different to striking. And it takes a little bit of doing because you're so used to just striking when a fish strikes. But essentially all you're doing is lifting that rod up, letting the rod tip actually catch the fish, and you're winding that fish tight onto that hook.
Yeah, okay. As we said, this time of year, this is the same in most storages across southeast Queensland. It's the time of year when the bass think they're going to spawn. They don't realise they can't get over a damn wall. And so they school up in the deeper water. Now in Ewen Maddock, obviously deeper water is only 4.5 metres. So how do you go about finding fish? Is it just a case of motoring around with your eyes glued to the side scan until you find some schools?
Yeah, pretty much, mate. Like a lot of guys, they know all the drop-offs and everything, and they normally hang off in that Adlington Creek or where the old creek used to run. So, you fish in areas like that. When the actual dam was built, they pushed up a lot of the old timber into big piles, and obviously, we know where they are as well. And they tend to hang off that kind of structure as well. Yeah, so that makes it a little bit easier to find them. There's been times there in Baroon Pocket Dam. Like I left one morning at 12:30, and I think I'd already hooked up to 104 fish was my last count, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, so like we've had some unbelievable sessions there. There's one social outing we had there. Yeah, leading in September, October. There was 5 guys from the stocking group, and we fished just the morning up until about midday, and we found a school fish and the bass. And between us, mate, we got approximately 250 fish for the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, and that was just using that technique that I just explained.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So time of day and weather conditions and those sorts of things, is there anything we need to know about, what conditions or what range of factors is going to give us a hot bite as opposed to a quieter day, or is it a little bit hit and miss?
Yeah, it's a little bit hit and miss, mate. I mean, preferably, I'll just go when I can go. I mean, but like if you had a really good time frame that you wanted to go, I really like those overcast days, mate, because it just prolongs the actual bite period. Bass don't like, I suppose, high light, the sun overhead and all that. So early morning, late afternoons, probably the best. Like, Baroon Pocket Dam, mate, it's pretty damn spectacular in the morning, especially in winter. And you got that fog on the lake, and it's just so misty, and there's something about it, mate. It's just absolutely beautiful. Backdrop of the forest in the background, and I don't mind a little bit of wind either, mate. But just like we've said in so many other podcasts that you've done, mate. It's just it pushes all the bait to one side of the lake, and it just, I suppose, increases your chance of finding fish. And
Yep. Now, mate, in 2023, when we were recording this, you mentioned that you'd had a session recently on Baroon Pocket Dam, a very good session. The conditions were atrocious. It had been raining. So, we're talking about late in the season rain here, because we're into the dry season now in southeast Queensland. So we wouldn't normally expect to get too much rain during June. So that's kind of upset things a little bit or changed things a little bit. And you said that there was an edge bite, which suggests to me that the fish are kind of almost taking on their wet season characteristics or their wet season behaviours.
Yeah, mate, 100%. Like it was just one of those hot bite periods, I suppose. And mate, I was casting that lure up on the bank and bringing it down and into the water, and they were hitting it like a metre from the bank. Like as soon as I was bringing it in, and like I was just using a TT switchblade, mate, and a 1/4 ounce. I was bringing it through that dirtier water again, mate. I just wanted to put a bit of a silhouette in the water. So I was using those darker coloured lures, like Orange Nightmare is one particular colour. It's like orange with a lot of black on it. And, mate, they were just nailing it. And as I was doing that, mate, I was still noticing a lot of school bass going underneath my boat. Like I was parked out from the edge at about 30 metres, and I'd have a few casts at the edge, and then I'd have a few casts out wide. And I noticed the ones that were schooled up out wide, mate. Obviously, it was pretty damn windy, and I was on the electric motor, and I had to stop just to adjust the angle that I was fishing. And as I stopped, they were actually hitting it on the drop, or the lure would actually drop, sit on the lake, and as I brought it up after finicking around with the electric motor, like they're absolutely nailing it coming off the bottom. So instantaneously, mate, I just knew that they were hitting it on the drop or bringing it up. So it was just casting, letting it go to the bottom, count to 5, and then just bring it off the bottom and bang. Like it was just
a slow line back up to the top.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. And like, I say to a lot of anglers, like, it's no point in just casting out a lure and just hoping for the best. You just trial and error, try different techniques. The biggest thing I do, mate, like is the visualization of what that actual lure is doing under the water is a massive thing. And I think, when you start understanding what that lure is doing, it's a huge advantage to the angler.
Yeah. And look, I've had quite a number of anglers over the years have said that to me, that try and imagine yourself swimming with the lure or being behind the lure and what that lure is doing, where it's going and how it's behaving. And that'll help you to understand, what you need to do to cause a fish to want to eat it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And just working out that pattern and then sticking to it pretty much on the day. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I guess that was the point I was leading towards with that comment about the rain and the fish, being an edge bite. It's interesting for me just because of my inquisitive mind. I'd be tossing up in my mind, what's more important to a fish, for an edge bite? Is it the rising water levels and the water running off the banks, or is it the water temperature? That during the wet season, typically the water temperature up a bit, so they come up into those shallows first thing in the morning for a bit of warmer water. But that kind of answers my question, doesn't it? Because it looks like it's rising water levels and runoff that are attracting them to the edge.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And like as we mentioned earlier, just on the chew, on the feed, looking for some just easy meal, worms, bugs, anything coming out of the ground. And there's been some sessions I've had there. There's when it's really flooding during those wet periods during the year. But I tend to fish with 10-pound braid. I use Platypus Pulse 4 braid. Purely, mate, it's a 4-carrier braid. It's just high strength, premium knot strength, and it's just super high abrasion resistant. And there was some elephant grasser I was fishing amongst up in the very upper reaches of Obi Creek in Baroon Pocket. And, mate, getting them out of that stuff was like it was tough. And I was fishing with, I know it sounds heavy, but I was fishing with 20-pound Platypus Stealth fluorocarbon leader, mate, and I needed every bit of that strength to pull them out of that big, thick grass.
Yeah.
Some of the stems of that grass was as thick as your thumb. Yeah.
They're powerful fighting fish, so doesn't surprise me if you're getting quality fish in heavy cover that you need to go that heavy. And again, a number of anglers over the years have talked about fishing that kind of tackle for bass.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I rate them for pound and for what they are. I rate Australian bass, especially when they get over 50 centimetres. Like the biggest bass I got out of Ewen Maddock Dam, I've actually caught in Ewen Maddock Dam was 56 centimetres and out of that thick kabomba weed. And, mate, I needed everything. Yeah, every bit of power, everything had to be right. Like even the reels that I'm using, mate, even though they're small reels, I'm using the Akuma ITX 2500 or the CMA HD. And, mate, the ITX has got a 8-kilo drag pressure. So for such a small reel, mate, they've just got, so much pulling power.
Yep.
And you just got to have all your ducks in a row, including all your knots. And,
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things you've got to make sure every I's dotted, every T's crossed, don't you? Your knots have got to be good. Your hooks have got to be sharp. Your casting's got to be spot on. Your drag's got to be good. And then you hang on and hope that everything holds together.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, especially in that tight country. In Ewen Maddock Dam, mate, and those big log piles there, mate, you get hit like it's like a brick hitting you. And fair dinkum, mate, if you're not ready for it, I don't know how many lures I'd have hanging on down on those snag piles, mate, because I've lost so many good fish down there. Yeah, like you got to be on your we've got to be on your game and get ready, to get them up.
And look, I've often said it's probably just as well that bass don't grow to the same size as barra, because I reckon they'd be unstoppable, mate.
Oh, mate, like black bass, mate, up in PNG.
Yep, absolutely. Now, Dave, I'm going to take a little bit of a sidestep here. We've talked bass for a fair bit, but as you said, in Ewen Maddock in particular, there are also Saratoga. And I believe that you've got a bit of a secret technique for targeting the Saratoga. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reserve this part of the conversation for our Team Doc Lures members. So these are the people that support the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast by becoming a member. They get access to a whole range of materials, extended episodes of the podcast, live streams, all sorts of stuff, and tackle as well through our Tackle Collective. So those guys support the podcast, and I sometimes give them this little bit of extra, Dave. And so I'm going to save this for them. So let's talk Saratoga, Ewen Maddock Dam. Give us the good oil, mate. What do we need to do to put ourselves in the running to catch a decent Saratoga?
Yeah, mate, this is great. I love it. Very passionate about Saratoga. Very close, I suppose, traits to a barramundi. So, mate, as we said in the podcast.
Hey, folks, just a reminder that right now you're listening to the public edition of this interview with David Brace, but my Team Doc Lures members are listening to the extended edition that contains a whole heap of information about how to target Saratoga on Ewen Maddock Dam. My Team Doc Lures members also have access to the Plus editions of multiple previous episodes, audio masterclasses, live streams, online tools and resources, and amazing tackle deals. So if you'd like to be part of that, team.doclures.com, that's where to go, team.doclures.com, because being a supporter of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast costs next to nothing, but there are a whole bunch of benefits to being our supporters and keeping us on the air. Go and check it out, team.doclures.com. Otherwise, folks, let's go back to the regular public edition of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. Awesome to get some tips on catching those. But what we might do now is bring back our regular ALF audience, mate, and continue on talking about fishing these systems.
Perfect. Thanks, mate.
All right. So you've given us a pretty good rundown in terms of some techniques. You've talked about a couple of different lures. You've run through the rods, reels, lines, and leaders, and we've covered all that stuff off. But curious to see what other lures you've got in your arsenal, mate, for those days when you're not fishing the grubs or the switchblades. What else would you sort of take out on these systems with you during the winter months in particular?
Mate, I'm really glad you asked me that, mate, because both fisheries being kayak friendly, and we've had this conversation, when we're talking about Kinchin Dam about kayaks, pedal power versus paddle power, and
yes,
both lakes, mate, at any various times of the year, obviously with thick, dense weed. There's one particular technique, and there's two lures that I use during this technique. So we're actually trolling. So we're not casting now, we're actually trolling.
Yep.
And what I use is a 1/4 ounce Vortex or TT Striker spinnerbait.
Okay.
I still like my darker colours, so like the purple blue scale or in the Vortex is the rust colour. So again, that silhouette, but it's the flash and vibration of the willow and Colorado blades on those lures that actually attract the fish. Now, I'll troll that lure about 4 to 5 metres behind my kayak.
Quite close, not a little line out.
Yeah, very, very close. Yeah, absolutely. And simultaneously, I'm actually trolling another lure behind it. So I've got 2 rods, I'm trolling 2 rods. So I'm in thick, dense weed. And I'm talking about weed where you couldn't get a pedalled kayak. It's paddle only.
Yep.
And in there might be pockets of weed that are a little bit deeper, 1 metre by 1 metre in diameter, or 1 metre in diameter, and just a little bit. Sometimes they might only be 1/2 metre deep to the next lot of weed underneath. So it's very, very thick weed. So behind that, the spinnerbait, I've got a 3.5-inch Z-Man trick swims or a Z-Man minnow, 3-inch minnows. So they're both paddle-tailed lures.
Yep.
And, mate, I have got that rigged on a 3.0 TT chin lock. So that's a weedless rig, but I do have the hook exposed just slightly.
Okay.
The other thing that I use, mate, is a bait scent, so the ProCure bait scent. And especially with the trick swim, mate, it's like a ribbed lure, bodied. So I just lather that with the bait scent, and just for an extra attractant. So when I'm trolling, the spinnerbait actually goes over those areas or those pockets of weed that are just slightly open, and then followed by that soft plastic lure. And then, mate, 9 times out of 10, they'll hit the soft plastic.
Okay.
So the flash and vibration of that spinnerbait goes over those pockets, attracts the fish up into that pocket, and then bang, they see the soft plastic and they just nail it as that soft plastic's going through that pocket.
Yep.
And that's where, mate, I caught some donkeys, absolute massive bass hiding in those areas. Plenty of, food source for them in there. That weed, they can monitor their core temperature or going deeper if they're too hot or come up to the surface.
And as you said earlier as well, bass have sensitive eyes, like, most fish have sensitive eyes, but bass in particular. And they can't close their eyes. Fish don't have eyelids, and their pupils don't constrict. So the only way they can keep bright light out, and if you think about our eyes, when somebody takes a photograph or shines a torch in your face or something like that, your pupils constrict and you blink, right, to shut out some of that light. If you couldn't do that, it'd be incredibly painful. Well, it is painful for fish. And the way that bass and other species can overcome that is finding shady places. Now, if you've got a lake full of kabomba, they are in their element because they can swim around in the shade of that stuff and just pop into those little holes that you've just described there, nab something and duck back into the shade again.
100%, Greg. They're like cast shadows in those smaller areas, so they'll just find where they're most comfortable in that ambush position, mate. Grab anything that goes over the top of them. But yeah. Now,
mate, I'm going to ask you one or two more questions, but before we do that, I reckon it's probably a good time for us to take a little bit of a break from the fishing talk and just have a bit of a chat about sponsors and people that support you. So I believe you've got some sponsors.
Mate, thanks, mate, and for allowing me to do this because, mate, I've been affiliated with Tackle Tactics now for nearly 12 or 13 years. And, as I said to you, mate, Gareth and the family and Justin Wilmer, mate, they're just an unbelievable bunch of people to deal with. And, mate, they're the largest distributor of, I suppose, fishing gear in Australia. You got your TT Fishing, Z-Man Lures, ProQ Ascents, Kuma reels and rods, mate. They've taken over the manufacturing of the platypus lines now. And, mate, they're like family to me, mate, and they've just been exceptional over the years. Mate, the other people I really want to give a shout out to is Robbie and Sue Wells from Sun to Sea UV Protection. Mate, being a kayak angler, you spend a lot of time on top of the water but exposed to the sun, mate, and they manufacture, 100% Australian made, 50 plus UPF certified clothing, mate, from gloves, neck socks, tech pants, and mate, they do it for kids and the whole family. So men and women, clothing. So
super important,
mate. It is. It really is. And as before we did the podcast, mate, I've just been to the doctors and had another lot of skin cancer cut out, and I'm going back again to get another lot cut out tomorrow. So mate, it's super important.
Yep, absolutely.
Mate, the other guys, mate, I've been affiliated with for a very long time is Safari H2O Kayaks, based in Victoria. They're Australian made by R&V Aqualine Industries. Mate, just a real tough, robust and very stable kayaks. And they've got a great range, mate. Sit in and sit on top, canoes, and mate, it's definitely worth checking them out, especially being, Australian owned.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So thanks to all of those sponsors, obviously, for supporting David. And it's the sponsors and that sort of thing that help us to be able to do the things that we do. And David's obviously, he's a great ambassador to his sponsors, but he probably wouldn't be here talking to us today if he didn't have that support from them. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and that works both ways, and we appreciate those sponsors. So, folks, I'll put together some show notes for today's episode. They'll be available over at doclewis.com. It's episode 629. So you can either zap over there, click on the podcast tab and scroll down till you find it, or you could just type 629 or brace, either way, into the search bar. That's going to bring up the show notes for this episode. You get the MP3, you get the PDF. They're there to be downloaded. There's some links there to a bass tackle cheat sheet and a few other bits and pieces. You can definitely take advantage of that as well. And of course, there'll be some social media contacts for David and links through to those sponsors that he's just mentioned as well. So, David, let's bring this conversation to a close with a little bit of a chat about how to actually go about extracting those fish. And you mentioned a minute ago, you're going to use some pretty seriously heavy tackle sometimes when you're fishing in those wood piles for those bigger bass. And you've also got the chance of a cod jumping on board or a saratoga as well, of course. But give us some tips. And I'm going to focus more on the weed here. So give us some tips for your technique for extracting bass out of that thick, dense kabumba that they love to dive into as soon as they're hooked.
Yeah, mate, yeah. And this, I suppose, goes for saratoga as well, because they love the weed just as much as the Australian bass.
They sure do.
Yeah, mate, yeah. And like some of the saratoga that we've got in Ewen Maddock Dam, mate, are up to about 90 centimetres in length. So they're not small fish. Mate, tight drag and just being really intuitive of what's going on around you. And like, in low light periods, you'll see saratoga swimming around. There's a very good chance there'll be bass in the area. There's a lot of lilies around as well. Mate, all I can advise, all the punters is what we talked about earlier. Tight drag, cross all your T's, dot your I's, and, mate, just when you're fishing is really visualize what that lure is doing and just be ready, just be ready for that hit because, mate, you never know when that big fish, the fish of a lifetime, that 50-plus bass or a 80-centimetre saratoga is just going to jump on your line. And, mate, you got to bring your A game because in some of that structure, mate, and especially in Ewen Maddock Dam, mate, you've really got to go hard. There's been times, mate, I've actually jumped off my kayak and actually jumped in the water to try to retrieve that bass from any structure that it's wrapped around. Yeah.
Yep, that definitely happens. And, mate, I mean, obviously a little bit of luck involved sometimes as well. In this style of fishing, there's only so many different things you can do to try and avoid that fish from bricking you in the weed. But also I'd imagine keeping that short line, the reason you're only trolling with 5 to sort of 10 metres of line behind the kayak, that also reduces the opportunity for the fish to fight horizontally and get into weed and structure and enables you to fight them a bit more vertically, I would have thought.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. And when you're in a kayak, when you get that really big strike and it's a good fish, don't automatically just go for your rod. What I tend to do, mate, is the first thing that fish will do is actually dive down back into that weed.
Yeah.
So instead of going for your rod and you're actually slowing down the momentum of that kayak, is actually put the accelerator down, mate. Just go with the paddle. And having that tight drag, you'll actually pull that fish up out of the weed.
Yep.
And then go for your rod, and you've got a better chance of actually fighting that fish in the top layer of water rather than amongst all that weed.
Yeah, great thought. So, I mean, obviously when a fish comes out of the weed to hit your lure, it's heading in the right direction. So what you're doing is stopping it from turning its head and going back to where it came from.
Correct. 100%, mate. Yeah.
And also taking it by surprise, right? Because when they come out to hit that lure, they're the predator. And then all of a sudden it's, hang on, now I'm the prey.
Yeah.
You've got that split second before they work out what's going on. If you can get them a metre out of the weed, 1.5 metres out of the weed, you've got a much better chance then of landing them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they soon wake up, mate. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, terrific. Hey, David, I'm going to bring this to a close now. But before I do, one more thing that we really should do. Tell us how, if there's anybody on the Sunshine Coast or anywhere else for that matter, who wants to get involved with the Ewen Maddock fish stocking group, tell us how we can get in touch or what we need to do.
Yeah, mate, we've got a Facebook group or page, I should say. And, mate, just send a message on there is probably the most efficient way of doing that. Ewen Maddock Fish Management Incorporated and one of our, team will get in contact with you and, mate, we'll point you in the right direction, send you out a membership form and it's, as simple as that, mate. $30 a year, mate, that's all it is to be involved. And obviously that's, covers your insurance to and from meetings, fishing events, etc. So, and, you're being involved.
Be a bargain at twice that price.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Good stuff. So I'll put a link also to your Ewen Maddock Fish Management Inc. Facebook group on the show notes for this episode as well, so people can find you from the Doc Lures website also.
Perfect, mate. Thank you.
David, once again, thank you for all your efforts in turning Ewen Maddock and the people who have worked with you, of course, in turning your local dam, Ewen Maddock, into a fine fishery and also Baroon Pocket Dam as well. Thank you for coming on board today once again and sharing some amazing fishing information that will inspire and educate and inform our listeners, no doubt at all. I really appreciate having you on board. And look, mate, all the best, tight lines, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks heaps, Greg. I really appreciate it, mate. Love it always. And yeah, mate, it's always a privilege. Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. For free show notes, downloads, tools and resources, please visit our website on doclures.com or consider supporting the show by joining Team Doc Lures to receive exclusive members-only episodes, tools and resources. But for now, tight lines and may the fish be with you.